I'm Brian McGeehan with Montana Angler. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Montana's most famous hatch, the iconic Salmonfly hatch. Salmonflies are one of the largest aquatic insects we have in the world, and they're certainly the biggest bug of interest in our rivers. What gets people excited about the salmonfly is truly the size of the insect. And that's very important because really big fish like to eat large morsels of food that have a lot of calories, and salmonflies certainly meet the bill for that. What that means for an angler is you have a chance of hooking some of the largest trout in the river when the salmonflies are out. To effectively fish Montana salmonfly hatch, it's also important to first understand the life cycle of the insect. We get really excited when we see these adults climbing around here, like this one on my arm, but this is the end of a 3-year process for this aquatic insect. Salmonflies start as nymphs, and because this is such a large insect, it actually has a 3-year life cycle. So from egg to adult takes about 3 years. The nymphs are going to live out in the main depths of the river for most of their life, and then when they hatch, they're going to move into the shallows, climb out, emerge from their nymphal shuck into the adult. Later, within a few days of hatching, they'll do their mating flights. You'll see they look like big helicopters in the sky. Mate, lay their eggs, and that cycle repeats. If you're seeking out the salmonfly hatch anywhere in Montana, it's important to find the water that they prefer to live in. Salmonflies are notorious for living in fast, rocky, boulder-strewn waters like we have here on the Madison. Anywhere we have canyons, you're going to find salmonflies. That's their preferred habitat, swift, rocky water. One of the biggest challenges in fishing the salmonfly hatch is actually finding salmonflies. They occur as adults in a very short window, sometimes just 2 or 3 days, and then the hatch is over. The hatch does spread out over the course of the state in terms of when it occurs. This is due to water temperature. Salmonflies need water temps in the upper 50s for several days before they incubate into adults. On any one river, we tend to find that the warmest water temperatures are downriver, so typically hatches will begin in the lower reaches of the river, and then as each day goes by, we find them further upstream. On a given river, you may find the hatch occurring over a 1 to 2 week window, although the peak of the hatch is moving upstream. Additionally, different rivers have different temperature profiles. Lower elevation rivers warm faster, and we find the hatch on rivers like the Smith River starting in the middle of May. Colder rivers like the headwaters of the Yellowstone and the Madison, that hatch delays, and we see the salmonflies occurring there late June and some years even into early July. We can break up fishing the salmonfly hatch into 4 phases, all related to the timing of the hatch. The first phase of interest to the angler is the migration of the nymphs. This occurs before we see adult salmonflies. These large nymphs migrate from the deep, heavy water mid-river all the way to the banks. During this process, fishing large stonefly imitations, shallow, can be quite effective. Perhaps the most exciting aspect of the salmonfly hatch is fishing within the peak of the emergence. Huge insects looking like helicopters flying through the air, cannonball strikes. This is what we envision fishing the salmonfly hatch. This can also sometimes be challenging for a few reasons. First, there's a lot of insects around and the fish can get a little picky. Secondly, sometimes the trout get full. Even though we see lots of big insects and salmonflies flopping around, the fish are no longer eating. If you're fishing right in the middle of a heavy hatch, it's important to try a lot of different fly patterns. Some patterns imitate the fluttering stone active on the surface. Some flies have a flat silhouette and are maybe more easy pickings for trout, so mess around with some different patterns. And finally, remember that even if not a lot of fish are feeding, the very last fish in the river to quit feeding is the biggest trout in the river with the biggest belly. So don't give up, even if the fish are full. Keep throwing and you might catch that 28-incher. The final phase, and one of my favorites, is to time your fishing to be just behind the peak of the hatch. The reason for this is the fish are now hungry again. When that big giant insect is hatching in abundance, the fish can get engorged and sometimes quit feeding. 3, 4, 5, 6 days after the hatch passes, those fish are hungry again. Even though you see very few adults on the water, the fish still remember that salmon fly, and you can have great success with more action fishing several days after the hatch has passed. The salmon fly is definitely Montana's most famous hatch. It doesn't always produce great fishing. Sometimes we see lots of other anglers all trying to chase that hatch. Sometimes the fish are full. It's not always perfect. We rarely catch more fish over the salmon fly, but it only takes that one big, giant 25, 26, 28-inch brown trout coming up and inhaling a size 2 dry fly that change you forever. It's exciting. It's what fly fishing is all about. It's the great white unicorn in our sport. If you haven't tried it, it's always worth getting out there and seeing what it's all about.